In the year 1900, in England, there was a young girl named Melissa Charlotte Edenhill. She was the youngest daughter of the Edenhill Dukedom in the Golden Jade Duchy. Melissa was known as the family's tomboy and had a knack for getting into trouble. Her teachers often quit in less than a week due to her disruptive behavior. In an attempt to curb her rebellious ways, she was sent to a convent, but even there, she got into an incident with a young nun. She's always involved in many ruckuses that you wouldn't believe she's a duke's daughter. Despite her mischievous nature, Melissa had a remarkable talent for the arts. Yet, this passion often led her into further trouble. Her current art teacher, a strict, traditional man, stands before one of her paintings, his expression twisted with disdain. "How does a lady of such honorable lineage create something so improper?" he demands, his voice dripping with frustration. The painting, a bold, boundary-pushing piece that was nothing like the soft, modest landscapes or portraits typical of a lady, left him fuming. "I will not teach a tomboy who has no respect for the arts or her standing." With that, he storms out, declaring that he's done. Her father, the Duke, had grown accustomed to such scenes but was still at a loss for how to handle his headstrong daughter. "Don't worry, Melissa. I'll find another art teacher," he assures her, but Melissa had grown weary of constantly being judged and dismissed. "No," she retorts, her voice laced with determination. "I want to go to Paris." The Duke blinks, taken aback by her sudden declaration. "Why all of a sudden, Paris?" he asks, puzzled by her resolve. "If it's to see an exhibition, you can go with your brother when he returns to England." But Melissa wasn't interested in waiting, nor in having a chaperone. "I want to see the salon, alone," she states with a tone that brooked no argument. The idea of his unruly daughter running wild in Paris, unchecked, filled the Duke with dread. He shook his head. "Absolutely not. You'll cause more trouble than I can manage. You're not going alone." Dejected, Melissa turns away and leaves the room, feeling the weight of everyone's expectations and criticisms bearing down on her. In the solitude of her room, she couldn't help but reflect on everything people say about her. Her thoughts drift to her late mother, the one person she felt might have understood her. As she holds a small portrait of her mother, memories flood back, memories of a woman who had been spirited and independent, traits that Melissa clearly inherited. Sometimes she wonders if her father's reluctance to let her be herself was because she reminds him too much of his lost wife. While lost in thought, Melissa hears muffled voices through the walls. Curiosity piqued, she presses her ear to the door. It didn't take long for her to catch what they were discussing, her. "She's so much like her mother." "It's unnerving," one voice remarks. "She is, but that's exactly why I want her to settle down," her father's voice replies. "She needs to lead a normal life, not get caught up in wild dreams." But then the conversation shifts to something that made Melissa's blood boil. Her fiancé was arriving the next day. Rage bubbled up within her. Her father had arranged a marriage for her without even consulting her. The mere thought of being tied down like some proper noblewoman sent her over the edge. She wasn't ready to be someone's wife or to be controlled by the expectations of society. Determined not to let anyone dictate her future, she grabs an old suitcase from her closet. Inside, tucked beneath layers of worn clothes, was a cherished photograph of her mother, her role model for independence. With fire in her eyes, she whispers to herself the words her mother once told her, words that had always stayed with her. "Chase your own path, Melissa." And with that resolve, she made up her mind. She was running away to Paris. She arrives in Paris with excitement. When asked why she wants a small apartment, she pauses to think about why she left home, then claims it's because she's a genius. Once settled, she finds herself unable to paint and curses her lack of ideas. She hadn't planned much when leaving home in anger, but thinks her creative block might be due to not yet adjusting to Paris. She decides to take a walk to clear her mind. During her stroll, she feels like everyone's watching her, though she's unsure if this feeling is accurate. Suddenly, some men begin following her. Noticing this, she quickly runs away and hides in a corner, losing them. After hiding for a while, she decides to hurry home. As she gets up, she accidentally bumps into a door. While still on the floor rubbing her head, she looks up to see a surprising sight: a naked man in front of her. She had bumped into him showering in his home. They both scream in shock, but the man hears the voices of her pursuers. He pulls her closer and covers her mouth to keep her quiet. After the people chasing her leave, he uncovers her mouth and apologizes. He quickly wraps a towel around himself, though it's a bit late as she has already seen and felt his nakedness from their close contact. Seeing an opportunity, she takes his hand and pleads for him to be her model. "You're a mad woman," he inwardly says, staring at her before sending her out of his house. At first, he thought she was just spouting nonsense. However, her nonsense turned out to be real. While he's outside one morning for his business, he notices her peeking at him. He draws her attention and warns her that he already said that he wouldn't do what she's asking of him, but she quickly denies it and says that she's there as a customer. She pays for a drink, and while sipping on the drink, she halts and asks what he thinks about becoming her model. "Really, girl? I thought she just said she was there as a customer." Subsequently, they sit at a cafe discussing the modeling contract. He's left in shock after seeing her salary offer because it's higher than his annual salary. With that amount, he can send at least 3 children to school. Such a mind-blowing offer, isn't it? Anyway, he introduces himself as David Berland and she as Melissa Charlotte Edenhill. On the first day of their contract, David is so confused about what to do, and he even thinks he's overdressed. He finally arrives at Melissa's house. Then she informs him that she's gathered everything they need, but she suddenly goes silent while staring at him. "What are you waiting for? Take it off," she says, as she gets ready to start drawing. He's taken aback by this statement, but she reminds him that it was written in their contract, which he clearly didn't see because he was blinded by money. After much struggle, she manages to push him to the bathroom to take off his clothes, and after a moment, he comes out in a towel, hoping that he doesn't have to take off everything. They decide on a pose, and so she begins the drawing, but David can't help but notice how serious she looks while at it, and this makes him wonder if the whole contract thing is more serious than he thought. The first time he saw her, he thought she had a great posture and was really elegant. He figured she must be a rich foreign lady because of the amount of money she was paying him. But when she was painting, her eyes looked so innocent, and it reminded him of a time when he also had those kinds of eyes and wanted to draw. All he could do was peek inside the studios, but no one welcomed him. While lost in thought, her voice cut in, apologizing and suggesting they call it a day as it was getting late. As she gets up from her seat and stretches, something unexpected happens. She accidentally flings her cover cloth onto his arm and then quickly realizes that she made a mistake by acting as if she was at home. Staring at her, David says that he only wanted to ask if he could receive his daily wage. Feeling embarrassed, she agrees to give it to him while inwardly wondering if he felt offended by her clumsy actions. Despite her resolve to do things well, it's already a mess. With Christmas around the corner, she begins her decoration while also noting that by this time, her father, big brother, and his partner must have prepared a grand party. Her mind drifts to David, since after the incident at her house, he politely drew a line between them even though she wanted to get closer. Within the confines of her home, she's feeling a sense of loneliness when a voice calls out her name from outside, so she rushes to the door only to find David. Taken aback, she asks why he's at her place, and he responds that there was a big fire in the church and all men in the village are required to help extinguish the fire. However, it looks like the fire won't go out anytime soon, meaning he has to go back. The issue now is that currently in his house, there are only children, and the youngest one has a fever. He can't find someone who can take care of them right away, that's why he came to her. Before he can even finish explaining, Melissa grabs his hand and agrees to help him, saying that saving people is more important at the moment. Subsequently, she embarks on the journey to locate his house with the directions he gave her, and as she arrives at the place, a little girl opens the door. The little girl, who's David's younger sister, Chloe, welcomes her in and informs her that her little brother with the fever just fell asleep. Chloe asks for her name, so she introduces herself and asks if the little girl has had dinner yet. She declines, but luckily for her, Melissa brought some food and asks if she would like to eat together with her. Curiously, Chloe, addressing her as big sister, asks where she's from as she doesn't seem French, and she replies that she's from England. Fascinated, the little girl shares that her big brother wanted to go to England because he said it has many extraordinary works of art. Thinking about it now, Melissa recalls that David did say that he used to learn painting before. She finds it kind of cute that he talks about it with his little sister. She even accidentally chuckles out loud, causing Chloe to ask if she likes her brother, but before she can respond, the little girl pulls her hand and starts heading to another room. She shows her the drawings her brother drew in the past, and they both admire his works. Melissa is about to ask a question when the little child interjects and explains that her brother stopped drawing when their parents passed away. Furthermore, she shares that they don't have any relatives, so her brother has to take care of them all by himself, and he also quit school. She wishes that her big brother would continue to draw without worrying about them. In the middle of their conversation, the little boy with the fever draws their attention and they rush to him. They discover that his fever has gotten really high. Melissa orders Chloe to get more towels and warm water to aid the situation. Acknowledging that she's the only adult there, she asserts that she has to pull herself together. Later that day, David returns home and finds Melissa fast asleep by his brother's bedside. Noticing how much the fever has come down, he gently wakes her up. "You're home?" she says, rubbing her eyes. She informs him that Alan's fever is almost gone, and she also fed Chloe and tucked her in bed. She assures him that they've passed the critical stage, so he doesn't have to worry anymore. Staring at her, he calls out her name and thanks her. He begins explaining that all along, he's misunderstood her. He adds that he didn't avoid her because he hated her, and so, he wants to apologize if he hurt her feelings. Almost as if she's been waiting for this moment all along, she embraces him while wishing him a Merry Christmas. The next day, Melissa is all set to go buy some paint, but because she left in a hurry, she forgot her wallet. We learn that recently, David faced some problems, and it's been 4 months since he became a nude model. Now alone, David can't help but think about Melissa. He says that even if she were to lose her life, she would never talk about herself. She doesn't even talk about painting, and she's someone who seems to be hiding something. He notes that they eat together and go out together, but he doesn't know if getting personally entangled is right. Now he's left wondering if this is how all artists are, or if it's that he's just not good enough. He tries to take his mind off such thoughts by remarking that she's a nice person, but as soon as he turns over, he finds her notepad on the floor. A few moments later, Melissa walks back into the house asking if he has seen her wallet, but by then, he has already begun reading the diary, so he immediately starts questioning her about it. She tries to explain, but he seems rather furious about the fact that she was planning to sell his nudes to a salon without telling him. "Who do you think you are to be doing this?" he says, fueled by anger. Angrily, he walks toward the drawing board that she's been hiding and pulls down the cover, revealing what she's been painting of him so far, while she just stands there in shock. He continues saying that art isn't a joke, so she should stop with the silly picture, but if she considers painting a joke, then she should stop. She pushes him to the bed saying, "What do you even know?" She begins crying and saying that she never thought of painting as a joke, but everyone said that it was a joke and they kept calling her a tomboy. The most frustrating part is that since everyone kept on saying it, she started to believe it, and now that he said this, it might just be true. On hearing this, he tries to comfort her by telling her that it isn't true and that she's the sweetest girl he's ever met. He adds that she's warm and more confident than anyone else, and then he apologizes for misjudging her without hearing her first. He leans closer, urging her not to cry, but before he can even complete his statement, she grabs and kisses him, or should I say bite him. Anyway, he pulls her out, inquiring who taught her this kind of kiss. To his surprise, she reveals that it's her first time, but he advises her not to get too excited. Rather, she should take it slowly and close her eyes. This intense kiss escalates quickly as she glides her hand into his pants, trying to unbutton it, but he stops her by grabbing her hands firmly. He mentions that she's really making him flustered, and then he asks if she's done such before. She replies by saying that she hasn't, but she has often played with herself, and she has done it a million times with him in her imagination. David looks at her groaning, but she shocks him again by sharing that she's been waiting for such a day. After that, things get very intense as they engage in a romantic moment. So, here's a quick backstory. Paris Salon, otherwise known as Salon de Paris, is an annual exhibition that was first held in 1667. At first, only members of the Academy or students of the Art Academy L'École des Beaux-Arts were allowed to display their work, but with time, more artists were allowed to do the same. In 1789, in the wake of the French Revolution, it was revealed that the salon was only opened to a small number of high-ranking members of the society. The Rome Prize and the Grand Salon winner was given the opportunity to study in Rome and have a chance to influence the arts in France. At the time when there was no proper means of publicity, the Paris Salon exhibition became a gateway to dreams and an important annual event for every painter. After their moment together, David asks her if she's really going to exhibit her painting at the salon undercover, and she affirms. He shares that he heard a great spot will be left vacant due to some circumstances that happened in the salon, and if they hang the painting there, it'll surely cause a commotion. Just out of curiosity, he asks, does it have to be a man's nude? And then, he suggests that if she wants to receive good reviews from the audience or judges, she'll have to hang something more familiar like Judith. He says that if he were to parody Artemis Gentileschi's painting, he thinks he would receive a lot of reviews because that's a painting that has an amazing story. After hearing this, Melissa explains that she's referring to the beauty of a man's body, but David holds her hand and asks if his body is beautiful in her eyes. And if so, isn't she the same as other artists who long for romance and beauty? He asserts that it isn't desire but objectifying worship, and then he tries to kiss her, but she quickly turns away saying that he's right. Then she begins explaining that she's not looking to succeed as just a decent artist. Instead, she wants to shock the people to the point of panic. In addition, she says that most people are against unfamiliar things, however, they look forward to shock and stimulation. With this, she turns back to him with an assuring gaze and says that their painting will definitely succeed. Hearing this, he blushes and extends his hand to her, informing her that he knows someone who works as a security guard in Palais, so he'll help her. As they both reach each other's hand for a handshake, a sudden loud knock on the door catches them off guard. With the people knocking and screaming her name, she instantly recognizes the voice and hides David in the closet. She opens the door smiling at her father, but she's shocked to see a guy named Philip, who accompanied him. Why did you bring him with you? She asks her father, slightly disappointed. Philip J. Stanley, who's the second son of the famous writer Stanley, laughs and asks if she's still aggressive. Now inside the house, she yells and reminds her father of her decision to not get married. On hearing this, Philip rises and requests permission from her father to speak with her privately. Meanwhile, David in the closet can't help but wonder who this guy is. He even assumes that he must be family since Melissa told him to hide. On the other hand, Melissa and Philip are having a conversation by the corner. He lights up a cigarette and asks if she's planning to hang her painting at the salon. Taken aback, she asks how he knows about that, and he responds by saying that it's because ever since she was young, she talked about it a lot. Surprisingly, he proposes marriage to her and mentions that he'll help her hang her painting at the salon. Since the main judge is a close friend of his father, it won't be hard for her to become a contestant, and even if they get married, he won't stop her from doing art. He adds that he's very interested in her and her world of art, so she should just think of him as her first supporter. After a brief argument, she shuts him up by asking him out of her house. Just after he shuts the door behind him, David crawls out of the closet. He looks really worried as he inquires about her well-being and the identity of the person who just left her house. She explains that it's her fiancé and that the engagement was arranged by her father when she was young, and she has no intention of marrying, neither does she love him. Feeling a bit of frustration, David turns away and mentions that she would have still told him irrespective of the situation, and then, he urges her to tell him everything that's going on right away. After she's done explaining things to him, he's in shock to learn that she ran away from home, yet her so-called fiancé came all the way to say such things to her. Suddenly, self-doubt kicks in and she begins questioning herself. Would I be able to achieve my goal even if I were to display those paintings that I can't even show my father? She starts crying and questioning why she always inconveniences others, but David comforts her by saying that probably, since her mother's demise up until now, she has been doing her best. He advises her not to suffer alone, rather she should speak with her father. With tears rolling down her face, she acknowledges his kindness but states that she wants to think about it on her own. Now alone, she sits on the floor staring at her painting and wondering if she should act stubbornly and tell her father that she's going to stay in Paris. Besides, there's something she's been doing, maybe if she shows him the results, he'll acknowledge her feelings. She asserts that she wants to stay with David for a long time, but a joke like the one her father is pulling has to end now. On the other hand, David has just arrived home, and the first thing his sister Chloe has to say to him is to ask if he's been spending time with Melissa. While hugging his little brother, he responds to Chloe saying that Melissa has some things going on, so she's resting. Along the line, the little girl reveals that she saw her earlier getting on the carriage with some rich man and they were headed towards the train station. Despite the heavy rainfall, David dashes off after hearing this. At this point he doesn't care whether she's engaged or not, and even if he can't be her muse, it still doesn't matter. Meanwhile, just as Melissa and Philip are preparing to leave, a voice screaming her name draws her attention. She turns around only to find David approaching her with tears in his eyes. As he approaches her, he says in French that he won't be able to understand if she speaks in English, and neither is he the kind of man who can go to Japan to see her art, but there is one thing he's sure of, which is the fact that he loves her more than anyone in the world. Still crying bitterly, he assures her that their art will succeed. She begins taking steps toward him while he begs her not to marry Philip. Before he can even finish speaking, she jumps on his body and embraces him. Her father and fiancé stand there in shock as they watch the lovers. In a moment, she turns to her father, telling him that she wants to stay in Paris. She holds his hand and says that for the first time in her life, she found something that she really wants to do, and not once did she consider it a joke. Having said this, she promises not to disappoint him and pleads that he trusts her one more time. He immediately recalls the words of his late wife, Melissa's mother, saying that their daughter will grow up to be a child with lots of surprises. So, he sweeps his fingers across his hat and says that he has something to do in England, so he's going back. He promises to come back when winter starts so that they can talk then. Then, he turns to David with a menacing tone and says that he still does not approve of their relationship and he only let his daughter stay because she said she wanted to paint in Paris. He also threatens him not to lay a single hand on his precious daughter because he won't just sit back and watch. Just as the train is about to leave, he professes his love for his daughter before boarding. Later that day, David carries Melissa in his arms to an unknown place, and when they finally arrive at their destination, she's thrilled at how beautiful the place is. He shares that he comes there often. Subsequently, she takes his hand and mentions that she just wanted to say that he was really cool back then with the way he just appeared. Although he feels embarrassed, he reveals that he has something to tell her. To her surprise, he takes out a ring, goes on one knee, and asks her to marry him. Admitting how ridiculous it sounds, he says that everything he said earlier was true. Shocked, she stands there with her hands on her cheeks and suddenly starts crying saying "I do." She even suggests they go to Japan for their honeymoon and adds that she wants to have 10 kids. That's a whole lot, girl. David can't help but laugh at what she's saying, but she still thinks that they have nothing but time. In the next scene, people are gathered at the museum to view the exhibition and there's a debate that there won't be anything worth buying this time around. There are several people in the museum inclusive of a little girl running away from her mother. While running, the little child stumbles upon a painting that leaves her in shock to the extent of not realizing her mother's call. When her mother comes to find out what she's staring at, she gasps as she sees what's before her. This draws the attention of other viewers as they gather in front of the painting questioning what it is. Amid the chattering, a particular lady mentions that she doesn't find the painting bad, though it seems a bit graphic. This painting raises a question: who is the model? Meanwhile, at home, Melissa runs to David holding a newspaper with a lot of information about their painting. It says their painting is ridiculing masculinity, and for that reason, it was taken down just a few hours after the opening. It earned a lot of attention worldwide, and many people have begun to search for the source and artist of the masterpiece. Her eyes sparkle as she continues to talk about their painting, and then she reminds him that she said they would succeed, after which they share a kiss. Just as things are starting to get heated, she halts and suggests they go somewhere tonight. Later at night, she decides to make their destination a surprise, and even their outfits seem very unusual. When they arrive at the place, she hands him a face mask and orders him to wear it before they enter, and after wearing the mask, she reveals that she wants to show him something. On entering, David realizes that it's an auction house, but she explains that during the day, it's a theater, and at night, they host auctions. He continues looking around and notices the gentlewoman sitting calmly, the courtesan, and the artist. Just by looking at them, he can tell that they are important. Eventually, the auction begins, and before he knows what's going on, Melissa blends into the congregation and signals him to remain quiet. The time to reveal the spotlight of the auction comes, and it's a piece by an unknown artist called the Venus, which happens to be Melissa's painting. The bidding starts, leaving David bewildered and wondering if the people there know that Melissa is the painter, but she responds that she put up the painting under a pseudonym. As the bidding continues, a particular woman raises her hand and bids 100,000, leaving the couple's jaw dropped. With no other bids surpassing hers, the painting was sold. Later on, the couple are on the balcony having a toast to their success and jesting about the environment. David admits to the place being more challenging and suffocating than he thought, but then he mentions that if Melissa kisses him passionately, everything will be okay. Just as they are about to go in for the kiss, the lady who bought their painting interrupts the compassionate moment. The lady takes off her mask, and Melissa immediately recognizes her as Marie Morijo, a renowned painter. Melissa, who appears to be so in love with the lady and her works, begins talking all about her admiration for the lady to the point of ignoring David. So, he decides to give the ladies some time to chat. Surprisingly, the lady asks if she's the one who drew the Venus. Taken aback, Melissa asks how she knew about it, and the lady replies by saying that one can tell just by looking at it. I mean, who wouldn't know when they cheered so loudly? Curiously, Melissa asks why she bought the painting for such a large sum of money when it's probably an immature painting, but the lady grabs her, urging her to be confident. She further gives her some words of motivation and reiterates that she should be confident in herself because she's young and life is long. Much later, the couple continues to marry over their win, and just then, Melissa tells David that she wants to give him half of the money they won at the auction. He tries to reject it by insisting that it is her painting, plus he already received the modeling fee. However, she still thinks that he's the reason she made it this far. She then reveals that the painting's name isn't Venus, rather, it is called My Little Shrew. It is said that a shrew can never be tamed by the world. Instead, the world is tamed by the shrew. To all the shrews in the world, cheers to desire and love. Let us know if you enjoyed this story in the comments. And please, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you in the next one.